Ms. Lees, are we ready? Thank you. Well, I didn't give her a warning. Thank you, everyone, for attending the Tuesday, August 13th council meeting. It is 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Hampton, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes, Mr. President. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Lees, could you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Boyce?
Present.
Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. Jensen?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. O'Connor?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Here.
Mr. Ayer?
Present.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Approval of the executive session memorandum for August 13th, 2019.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Pick one.
Pick one, anyone.
Motion carries 9-0. Approval of the minutes of the August 13th, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those,
You're doing the wrong date,
dates.
Brian. It's the July 23rd. Yeah.
those are wrong dates?
July 23rd.
Okay, I've got a typo on my script here.
I need to abstain from that last executive session memorandum from July 23rd. I was not there, yeah.
So do you want to redo the first one? The date's wrong. Approval of executive session memorandum from the July 23rd, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 7 with 2 abstentions. Approval of the minutes of the July 23rd, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 7 with 2 abstentions. Approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Petitions or comments by citizens who are present. I have none. If someone would like to speak, they could fill a comment card out right outside the door and pass it to Madam Clerk Lees. Mayor's report to council. Mr. Cook.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Mayor sends his regards. He was not able to attend this evening, but I'm happy to be here in his place to go over the report. So in the last couple of weeks, Mayor Ditzler and many of the members of the council and our department directors attended a Noblesville Chamber luncheon that was at Mustard Seed Gardens on all of our Noblesville not-for-profits. Also celebrated Mayor Ditzler's birthday in July. And we also met with the Levinson family. The descendants of the Levinsons, of course, were one of the founding families of Noblesville from a long time ago. And they come back occasionally. They still have a great presence here in Noblesville. They still sponsor a scholarship with Noblesville High School. And we wanted to recognize them for that and to also continue that relationship, welcome them back as the Levinson opens up next year. On July 25th, we hosted a meeting of the downtown businesses where we talked about downtown parking, the Levinson project, facade grants, and other topics of interest. And we also hosted the Noblesville United Soccer Club kickoff for the season. And on August 5th, we opened the roundabout on Field Drive in Cumberland. So thank you, Councilmember O'Connor, for attending that. We've also welcomed a new business to Noblesville called Aerial Fit to Fly. It's a yoga business done on bungee cords. I did not get up there and try it out myself in my suit, but recommend you all check it out. And we're very pleased to announce that we have welcomed a new director to the city, Director of Engineering, Allie Krupski. Is she here today? She's not able to attend. I know you've all met her before, but she's going to be an awesome addition to Noblesville. I believe she was a Purdue University grad, which I know a lot of Boilermakers will love that, but we're very excited for the contributions that Ms. Krupski will be making to the city as the Director of Engineering. We also had a business visit today at the Stony Creek Business Park with Breakers Unlimited, longtime Noblesville business. And then coming up the next couple weeks, we have a swearing-in ceremony on August 21st with new members of our Noblesville Fire Department. We're excited to welcome them to the ranks. We have a ribbon cutting with Edward Jones on August 22nd, and we also have an event called A Fair Shot for All Children on August 22nd. On August 26th, the mayor, myself, and other members of the city will be heading down to French Lick for the annual Ideas Summit from Accelerating Indiana Municipalities. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Council committee reports.
Mr. President?
Mr. Jensen.
Yes, on Friday, August 2nd, the Roads Committee met, and myself, as well as Ms. Wiles, Mr. Boyce, and Mr. O'Connor were in attendance, and Mr. Johnson joined us by phone. A few updates, some new signage for school zones. As we all know, Noblesville Schools has adjusted their start times, and according to that, we needed to change some signage in terms of school zones. Those have been all changed out, and I appreciate the street department and engineering department for coordinating on that. Midland Trace Trail, personal favorite of mine. Phase 3, which is Willowview to Hague Road, shall be completed by September 1st. I was driving by there today, and they were actually doing some paving on that. With that phase complete, you'll be able to connect across Hague Road and make an entire loop around Morris Reservoir, which is exciting. Also, will connect you to Forest Park, which will get you to downtown. So very excited about that project. Riverwalk Phase 4 is completely, other than a few small items, is complete and now extends down to Southside Park. The Levee Trail is also complete, so I appreciate all the efforts we've been making in our trails to complete some of our trail master plan and trail systems in the city of Noblesville. There have been 3 major roundabouts that have been completed in 2019. The 19th and Pleasant Street roundabout construction's complete. We're still waiting on a few damages. We've been working with some NDOT standards with the contractor there. Greenfield and Howe is complete, as well as Cumberland and Road opened on July 31st, just in time for school. There's still a few minor details that they are working through with that roundabout, but I know that they were on a tight schedule, and I appreciate all the efforts that they were doing that in order to make school traffic flow in time for school to start. Final piece, maybe many have read about this, the Logan Street pedestrian bridge. Due to some weather issues, there is a delay in that project, but is scheduled for completion in May of 2020, and I appreciate all the residents who are bearing with us through that. That delay on that project is guaranteed to be a great project once completed, and we know there's some pain in the process, so we appreciate all those that are working with us to get that completed. And that was really the highlights of the Roads Committee meeting from August 2nd, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you.
Any other committee reports? Mr. Boyce.
Mr. Air, the wastewater committee met on July 29th. In addition to administration, Mr. Jensen, Mr. Peterson, and I were in attendance. And we did quite a bit of talking about kind of where the wastewater department is, especially with the long-term control plan and with many of the unfunded mandates that we've been given from the environmental agencies. And one of the suggestions that we did was we asked for them to come up with some pricing, because there's quite a few little things that we're going to have to do coming up with new unfunded mandates. Basically with lift stations, we need another new route over the river. We are trying to buy a little bit of land in order to do that, and then also the trash and recycling contract is going to be up at the end of this year. So trying to get the pricing for all of those so we know where we stand, so that we can kind of also know where we're going to have to stand on rates, because with all of those different things, then we probably are going to have to continually keep raising rates a little bit rather than, but we all, I think, agreed in somewhat that we need to continue doing that and looking at it all the time so that we don't wait and then get into a situation like some of our neighbors have where you have to go up a huge percentage. We'd much rather try and stay on top of it and keep some reserves.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Any other committee reports? Ms. Wiles.
President, the Finance Committee met on Thursday, August 8th, and there are several items on our agenda this evening that were discussed, but I'll talk about them briefly. One item is regarding the city court staffing, that The judge came into a situation where he had several staff members who had long-time experience, 20-plus years, and one of those staff members has left. And so while he has hired a new administrator, she doesn't have nearly the experience that the previous administrator had, and so he's looking to hire a third full-time clerk. And so he will talk a little bit more about that. It will be part of a salary ordinance adjustment. Then also, we talked about the funding of purchasing kiosks for installation into the current metered lots, and so that's another item that's on the agenda later on this evening, so we'll talk more about that. And then Mike Reuter, who is a consultant to the council, came and did a 2020 revenue forecast for the Finance Committee that was then presented earlier this evening for our budget meeting. The great news is that Noblesville is a growing community, and so we are moving in the right direction, and things are looking very good for 2020. And the claims come to you with a recommendation from the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Wiles. Any other committee reports? See none. Moving on to approval of claims.
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Previously discussed ordinances. Council consider ordinance 31-07-19, an ordinance repealing and replacing ordinance 53-11-17 relating to the adoption of standards and a preliminary development plan for Crossroads Plan Development adjacent to the State Road 3832 East Split. Ms. Yelton.
Good evening. As you may recall at the last meeting, this is basically an amendment to an existing PD. Basically, the areas that they have modified is they have shifted slightly the roundabout so that it's not being constructed over a storm sewer. They've also reduced the total length of their roads and other infrastructure. They've eliminated one of the ponds from the original concept, and they've also modified the layouts for the single-family dwellings. As you may recall, the bulk standards include in Area A, the elimination of the floor area ratio, the increase of maximum lot coverage to 55%, and an increase of lots by 5, which the Area A is this area in here. Area B is this area, and it basically will be reducing the lot size slightly, reducing the minimum lot width, increasing the floor area ratio to 40%, and also increasing the number of lots by 8. Those were the amendments to this proposed plan. It did come forward to you with a favorable recommendation for adoption from the Plan Commission with 9 members present by a unanimous vote.
Any questions of Ms. Yelton? Petitioner, have any comments or? No?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would make a motion that we approve ordinance number 31-07-19, an ordinance replacing and repealing, just the number? Okay. 31-07-19.
Second that.
That's been moved and seconded. Ms. Lees, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
9-0, the ordinance is adopted.
Moving on to ordinance 34-07-19. Council consider ordinance 34-07-19, an ordinance approving additional appropriation from the general fund for a public purpose grant concerning the reconstruction of Logan Street Bridge over White River. Mr. Spalding?
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and as just previously described by the President in introducing the ordinance, it's for the aforementioned pedestrian street bridge. This is the second reading of this ordinance. It was presented at the last council meeting, and the appropriation amount is set at the maximum cost contribution share for the city based on the interlocal agreement with the county. So if you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding? With that, I'd like to open the public hearing for ordinance 34-07-19.
Mr. President,
Mr. Jensen.
seeing no public come forward, I'd make a motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 34-07-19.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. With that, I'd like a roll call vote. Now we need a motion to approve.
Need a motion.
Mr. President, I would make a motion that we approve ordinance number 34-07-19.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Ms. Lees, would you do the roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Taylor? Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
9-0, the ordinance is adopted.
New ordinances for discussion. 36-08-19, council will consider ordinance 36-08-19, ordinance approving additional appropriations from the parking meter fund to replace and upgrade existing parking meter equipment. Mr. Spalding?
Motion to introduce? Second.
Mr. President, members of the council, again, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and what you have before you is the introduction, first reading of the appropriation, the ordinance for the additional appropriation for the replacement of the existing parking meter equipment. The request amount is $84,100, which is just approximately, just slightly above, just because I like to round up a little bit. The invoice that the police department has, or the agreement, I don't know, I guess it's not an invoice yet, but the agreement they have with the prospective vendor for the purchase of the equipment. And with that, that basically describes what the purpose of the appropriation is.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding? Mr. Spalding? Pardon me? Mr. Boyce?
Just for clarification, I know that we've had quite a bit of social media talk about the new parking structure and everything. This in no way changes anything with that, correct?
As far as I understand, it's new equipment.
It's just new equipment, exactly, right? We're going to be
Right.
talking about
Right,
the answer, but just wanted that kind of part of the record. Thank you.
gotcha, yeah.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Jowett, you might be able to help me on this, since I know you've kind of become a parking guru, unwanted job.
I was
of
perfectly
parking.
content to let Mr. Spalding answer all the questions.
Where are these kiosks going to be placed?
They're going to be placed in the existing pay meter locations. So this is just new technology to replace the old technology. So 9 of them will actually be placed in either what are currently pay lots or locations on the street that have street metering, with 1 in reserve, basically in case something breaks.
And we're not changing the rate of parking or doing anything at this
No.
point in time?
This is just new equipment.
Okay. All right.
And also just one where I think I already know the answer, but I want to, will be coins and credit card, is that correct?
Coins and credit cards, correct. Either or. Or the option of using an app.
New technology.
So we're going high
New
tech, is that what
technology.
you're saying?
Any other questions of Mr. Police Chief Jowett?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor?
make a motion that we approve, this is first reading. We need a public hearing too.
So we need a motion to hold a public hearing?
With that, I'll open the public hearing for ordinance 36-08-19. Mr. Jensen.
Seeing no public come forward, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 36-08-19.
Second.
Moved and seconded to close the public hearing. With that, no other questions? And we will see it again in 2 weeks. Thank you. Council to consider ordinance 37-08-19, an ordinance amending ordinance 36-10-18A, the 2019 salary ordinance for employees and appointed officials. Ms. Ramon?
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Yes, she did.
As stated on the attached letter, there are two changes requested for the 2019 salary ordinance, and both of these were discussed at our August 8th Finance Committee meeting. And the first one is for the city court, is requesting a new position entitled Administrative Court Clerk. And the timing of this request is due to the turnover of the court administrator and our newly hired court administrator, and the upcoming and possible retirement of another court employee. The funding is being requested on another agenda item for this evening. And the second request is for the Office of Finance and Accounting. And this is a request to increase the biweekly compensation for the budget financial analyst position. This is currently a vacant position. However, we are in the final interview stages and hopefully have a candidate hired very soon. I would respectfully request that the ordinance be considered to be approved on first reading. And Judge Cook and Mr. Spalding is here if you have any questions or if there's anything that I can answer for you.
Boyce?
I have a question for our attorney. Are we able to pass on first reading before we get the funding later on down in the meeting? Not sure exactly how that would.
You
pass it and then we.
can make a motion subject to funding, since funding is probably 10 minutes away.
That's what I figured, but I just didn't.
You can
It's a little cart before the horse, but that would make sense. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
we could have rearranged the agenda at the start of the meeting, but it's substantively, you're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have one for, I think Mr. Spalding probably will need to answer this.
Frampton?
This has been a budgeted position that has not been filled.
Correct.
Was the need to raise this,
Mr. Spalding, you might go over to the microphone, please.
is the need to raise this because you're having trouble filling it?
Well, yes, and I guess that's too short of an answer. Actually, the discussion was before we started the hiring process and we graded out the position and we started looking at the potential skill levels of the candidates. In collaboration with HR, we decided that it needed to be advertised. It was most appropriate to be advertised and posted at a higher salary level than had been proved before. So we actually we never advertised it at the lower salary level, and this is aligning with the level we advertised it at. Now, there is no guarantee that the actual pay for the individual will be the amount in the salary ordinance. That's just a maximum, and depending on the candidate, it may be less than that. So,
That answers
Yeah.
it, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would make a motion that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 37-08-19 on first reading,
Subject to funding.
subject to funding.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to suspend the rules and pass ordinance 3708-19 on first reading. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries. With that,
Mr. President, I'd make a motion that we approve ordinance number 37-08-19.
Second.
Subject to funding transfer later on this evening.
Still second.
moved and seconded. Ms. Lees, would you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
9-0, the ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
Previously discussed miscellaneous. Miscellaneous number 1, council consider resolution RC-7-19, A resolution regarding an economic development agreement as amended. Ms. Johnson.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. President and council members. Before you is a resolution requesting your approval of an economic development agreement with Boomerang Development LLC. Amendments have been made to the development agreement that was presented to you on July 9th, and I will refer to those amendments in a moment. But first, I'd like to give you a short overview again of the project. As a reminder and as seen, I don't know how to use that. Can you see it? Okay. Boomerang Development LLC wishes to develop approximately 240 acres located on the north and south sides of State Road 3238, just east of Presley Drive. This development will be known as Noblesville Northeast Business Park and Crossroads. It will consist of 102 acres of land designated for industrial business park development, and that would be Area A. 40 acres for commercial development. Those are the areas labeled E. So here, and the little box. And the remaining acreage will be senior multifamily, Area B. Senior two-family detached, which is Area D. Here. And additional multifamily development, which is Area C. This development, upon completion, will have a proposed new assessed value of approximately $158 million, up from the current assessed value of $2,242,200. The city's financial participation in this project will include issuing bonds in an approximate amount of $6.3 million to construct regional infrastructure improvements, as seen in your packet that you received under Exhibit C. The developer will purchase the bonds, of which the debt service payments will not be an obligation to the city and which minimizes city risk. The city will pledge the tax increment revenue from the developments of Area B, the senior multifamily, right here, and Area C, multifamily, here, in order to pay the debt service on the bonds. Based on the estimated projections of the areas, 75% of the tax increment will be needed for annual debt service payments. The remaining 25% of the tax increment revenue will be available for the city and the RDC to use for any permissible purposes. The following items have been addressed and amended in the development agreement following input received since the July 9th council meeting. In Section 3 of the development agreement, a modification has been made to extend the capitalized interest account date to August of 2023 due to the anticipation of real property assessment taking place in 2022 and thus having the first installment of property taxes being collected in June of 2023. In Section 5, an amendment was made to clarify that Areas B, senior multifamily, and Area D, senior two-family detached, must be operated as age-restricted communities. And then lastly, in Section 14, this was modified to provide clarity that the land use approval is subject to the city's UDO standards. Language was also included to memorialize cooperative efforts between the city and the developer in order to help with the execution and the required deliverables to carry out the development agreement. The newly amended agreement was received and discussed positively during the Council Finance Committee meeting, which took place on July 18th. I'd like to tell you some of the benefits of this development to the city. It meets our housing study gaps. It's a new business park development in the city. Increases our net assessed value. It installs significant infrastructure improvements. The developer assumes all risk by purchasing the bonds. And approximately $2.6 million tax increment dollars will be available annually to the city upon full build-out. In the council chambers tonight, representing the project and available to answer any questions, are Corby Thompson, owner of Boomerang Development, his counsel, Steve Harden, and Sam Swafford of Faegre Baker Daniels, and also we have Mr. Jim Harger of Harger Properties. I'm also happy to answer any questions that you have. If there are no questions, I request your approval and adoption of Resolution RC 719.
Questions of Ms. Johnson? The questions of the petitioner? I hate to have Mr. Harden come all the way up here.
Make a comment.
With no questions, do we have a motion?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I'll make a motion that we approve for RC dash, RC dash 7 dash 19 as amended. You want to amend it?
Amend the agreement.
Have not amended it yet, sorry. We need a motion to amend.
Mr. President, I will make a motion that we amend RC dash 7 dash 19 as amended,
Presented.
as presented.
Thank you.
I should have written all this down.
Did you second that?
Second.
Kristen.
It's all right. It's been moved and seconded multiple times.
Yes.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 7-0. Do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. President,
Mr.
after all
O'Connor.
that, I'll make a motion that we approve RC dash 7 dash 19 as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you very much.
Transfers, council consider transfer TA-10-19, an appropriation transfer in the parking meter fund to fund a purchase of support posts for new signage in certain city-owned parking lots. Mr. Spalding.
So yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and this is somewhat tangentially related to the last action. There is the need, as we're replacing the equipment, to put up some new signage, and there will be posts required for these signs that need to be purchased. Apparently, the street department is actually handling the signs, and this is just allocating the money to the proper account to purchase the sign posts within the parking meter fund for the police department, and it's a small transfer of $4,700.
Any questions of Mr. Spalding regarding parking lot posts? Mr. Jensen.
Mr. President, I motion that we approve transfer number 1, TA-10-19, as presented.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Transfer number 2, transfer to consider transfer TA-11-19, an appropriation transfer in the general fund to fund an additional staff position for city court. Mr. Spalding.
Well, again, Mr. President, members of the council, this one should sound pretty familiar from the ordinance that was just discussed. It addresses the funding, and the actual transfer is coming from the personal services account line or budget of the police department into the court because the police department has some savings from vacancy and turnover. They have a large personal services budget, so they'll have available appropriation that can be transferred to cover this. The court's budget is very small, and so, they didn't have excess funding available to cover the added staff position for the remainder of the year, but this should address that problem for them.
Any questions of Mr. Spalding? Mr. Jensen.
President, I have a motion that we approve transfer number 2, which is TA-11-19, as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-11-19. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Council comments.
Mr. President, I will say, to add on to Mr. Jensen's comments earlier on the Roads Committee meeting, but the Levee Trail marked the 100th mile of trails that we've built in the city of Noblesville, so I think that's something to be proud of and celebrate, and there's more to come, but 100 miles is a lot of miles, so, and we've got more to do.
Exactly.
Mr. Cook, Judge Cook. I'd like to welcome you to our council meeting. You have any comments or anything?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you we don't see you very often, so I appreciate you coming. Any other, Mr. Howard?
I'd let the council know, speaking of trails, the first substantial visual step in the rail banking project has been approved. The bids have been approved for the vendor out of Salt Lake City to begin pulling up the rails. They will start in Fishers and work their way north. And the project in Noblesville ends at Division Street, and we're looking at options to go ahead and remove up to the north right-of-way line of Logan Street. And then that way the new train can come downtown, but not cross Logan and Connor and cause congestion. So there'll be a lot going on in the next few months with that project.
Thank you, Mr. Howard, for the update. Any other council comments? Do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn?
Yes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. We're adjourned. Thank you.